When one thinks of a rogue, what is the first image that comes to one's mind? I would place a bet that when most of you fine readers think of a rogue, you think of a highwayman, or a robber, or thief. Am I correct in that assumption? Well, be that as it may, allow me, the narrator of this fine story, to endow you with some knowledge on the topic. Shall I proceed? Very well, here I go. Now then, I suppose, to really answer this query, one must go all the way back to the origins of such a word. Rogue. R-O-G-U-E. Rogue. A dishonest or worthless person. A vagrant or miscreant. A scoundrel. A scamp. A tramp. A bandit or cutpurse. And generally, one who is not trusted and will be likely to do you wrongly, dirty, badly, or otherwise interact with you in a sly and shady type of way. My friend and employee and lackey, or whatever you want to call him, Denner Voss, is labeled as such because of his line of work. He is a thief, a professional thief, and it is because of his chosen profession that he is labeled a rogue. However, if one gets to know Mr. Voss, one quickly finds that he is not a tramp, a scamp, a cutpurse, or a bandit. He won't readily lie to you, or be dishonest with you, or steal from you. He won't try and trick you or harm you through manipulation. He won't set you up, or trap you, or take your belongings without your permission. You could leave him in a room with a fortune, gemstones, gold coin, jewelry, priceless artifacts, whatever you can think of that you value, and he wouldn't steal it while you were away. Every single coin, every last gemstone, everything, down to the tiniest crumb, will be just as you left it. The old adage, don't judge a book by its cover. Well, that's Denner. For, you see, Denner looks, well, for lack of a better word, rather dark. He is tall, standing about 6 foot. He is slender, but in such a way that whatever garment he puts on seems to hug his form. For he is slender, not skinny, and is rife with musculature of a chiseled variety, very defined and sculpted by many years in the rough streets, dealing with rough people and rough situations. But that, my good readers, is exactly the point I must get across. For while Mr. Voss has, from infancy, been subjected to rough situations in life, and difficult hardships, violence, death, illness, corruption, shaddiness, backstabbing, betrayal, hatred, trickery, deception, and pretty much everything else in between. He is none of those things because of it. No, indeed, Denner is, in fact, one of the most honorable men I have ever known. On the other side of that coin, there is a darker nature to the profession, which Mr. Voss has chosen to facilitate his life. There is a shadowy side to it, of course. As required for one who calls themselves a professional thief, one must be willing to shut off their morals at times, even going so far as to bury their emotional empathy to a point where it is hardly even there, especially if one gets confronted with a deadly scenario, such as getting caught red-handed. For if one does get caught red-handed, they are very likely to face the wrath of those they were stealing from, which oftentimes turns violent, even deadly. So, in so far as one can, they must be ready to face death and deal it, without feelings about it one way or the other, as self-preservation is paramount to success in the thievery line of work. Denner Voss was always a very skilled thief, but his empathy would oftentimes get in the way, as was the case the night he brought Owlie Duresti into our lives. Now, do not mistake my meaning, for Owlie has turned out to be a ray of sunshine in my life, and I am sure Denner would agree. But that fateful night, the night Denner Voss returned with Owlie in tow, it wasn't so much a blessing, not for me, for I was upset and made it apparent. I had been rather rude at first, being quite upset about the return to my abode without the Orb of Finality. You were to come back with the orb, not a woman, who you do not even know, who happens to be a fellow thief. Why would you deviate from the mission I gave you? I had been saying, standing with my arms folded across my chest. Denner frowned, seemingly unaccustomed to being spoken to in that manner.
I had no choice, Master Verr, he said. What was I supposed to do? Let her fall, she would have died,
he said, defiantly. Perhaps you ought to have, I said, immediately regretting it, as the expression on Owlie's face turned sour and hurt. She was sitting on a stool in the corner of my laboratory, observing timidly. The existence of all living things, and anything else, is far more important than one single life. You chose the one over the many, and not just the many, but the everything to exist. That's the part I'm upset about. I glared at Denner.
What kind of man would I be? if I just let her die. I couldn't. It was not a choice, Master Verr. So if you want to be upset with me, go ahead, I don't care.
And he turned to leave the room, fuming. Now you just stop right there, boy, said I, angering in earnest. You and I are not done discussing this.
You may not be, wizard, but I am, and you can't do a damned thing about it.
And he left, motioning for Owlie to follow him, and she rose to go with him wherever he was going to go. I put up a hand as she glanced my direction. Please, miss, I said, softening my expression. Please wait just a moment. Let me speak with you.
I'm not sure. I should probably just go. I'm not worth much. Nothing at all, it would seem.
And she narrowed her eyes a bit. I understood her spiteful demeanor. I had been very rude. Please, forgive my earlier comments. They were not said with any tact. I apologize. She looked downwards, folding her hands in front of her, and I took a moment to appraise the woman before me. She was a human woman, in perhaps her 25th or so season. She had startlingly beautiful eyes, of a green like that of a mossy creek bed, dark grey almost, but with twinkling bits of the brightest green hue, shining there like tiny emeralds. In fact, she was startlingly beautiful all around, and I could easily see how my lackey, Mr. Voss, had been smitten with her right away. Her hair was dark brown, and had a shimmering quality to it, flowing, almost like the hair of an elf. For I had seen many elves in my 99 winters, and the hair upon their heads always had a similar shine, though she did not appear to be an elf, even with those eyes and that hair. No, she was a human as far as I could tell. She did have the high, angular cheekbones similar to that of some elvish folk, the moon elf variety to be exact, but that was the only similarity to the facial features of the elf kid. That and her eyes. I scrutinized her for a long moment more, evaluating her body, which was perfectly proportioned and very alluring to the male sex. I was certain of that. Her skin, also, was very smooth and slightly milky in appearance, similar to how moon elf skin was, but it was not pale. In fact, the opposite, for she had the tan of skin that came with many days in the sons of Toril. I did begin to wonder, however, at her lineage. Even if she was a human, which it did mostly appear to be, her unique beauty stirred within me many questions about where she was from. So, after staring at her in the manner a professor might a student, I asked, "Where is it you are from, Owlie? Do you mind if I ask?" It took her a moment, as I believe she hadn't expected my question, but after she cocked her head to the side, took a breath, and folded her arms over her chest, she said,
I'm from here, sir, Selgaunt, from here in this very city. Why do you ask, wizard? Have I given you some reason to be curious?
And in fact, she had, though it was by no doing of her own. But I didn't want her to think anything untoward about it. So, I said, "No, you haven't done a thing, miss. But what kind of host would I be if I didn't know at least something about my guests?"
I suppose that is a fair answer. Yes, I am from Selgaunt, but you will permit me to omit my last name, won't you?
That I will, though you have nothing to fear from me if you were to tell me. I assure you, I have no need to do any further checking into you, Owlie. I will say, however, that I am very sorry to have hurt your feelings, or offended you by what I said just before. Please forgive me, and you are welcome to stay in my home for the night if you wish. As you can tell by our friend Denner there, I motioned to the doorway he had reappeared in. I'm no stranger to housing those who share your affinity for thievery. And I smiled as best I could, so unaccustomed to it I was. In those days, she softened a little at my apology and nodded.
I appreciate that, sir. I could use a little rest, and some food. And possibly if you could tell me a little more about the orb you were talking about before. Is it valuable? Do you need it found and taken? If so, I would like to help. Denner, find it for you. It is the least I can do for what he has done for me, you know, saving my life and all. Also, I haven't been very successful lately, you know, at the thievery, obviously. So, I could use the coin if you have anything else which needs found. Denner told me a little bit about his role here, and has already said he wouldn't mind a little help.
Now, before I continue with the dialogue, let me just take a pause. For, when I tell you about a woman who can take your breath away with one glance, and when she speaks to you, the subtle changes in her tone and mannerisms make your heart ache. That is the woman named Owlie, and that is what endeared me to her right away, her charm. However, I am a wizard, and not just a wizard, and at the risk of sounding arrogant, the enormity of my skill level when it comes to wizardry is, well, second to none. I am a Grand Magus of the 17th tier, and that is no small feat. I can do things like turn myself and anyone else of my choosing nearby, completely undetectable by anyone, unless they are godly. Not even the True Sight spell can counter it. I can teleport myself, and one or two of my comrades, across the entirety of Faerun, from Sembia to the Moonshae Isles, even beyond to Karator. I can knit the weave of magic so deftly that I can thread an illusion spell so complex that you would live a complete and total other life of my design, so real to you that you would swear on all the gods that you had a whole other identity, family, friends, experiences, and so forth, and you would experience this all in the span of a split second. I can launch molten fire from my hands, turn day to night with one stanza, and I can create solid matter like food or water, or even beverages like ale or mead or whiskey, from thin air, using only my mind. I can fly. I can swim underwater for as long as I want, for I can breathe water like a fish. I can see through walls, even of the thickest stone. I can cast a single spell and take your life in the blink of an eye, and make it so you cannot be resurrected again ever. I can do all these things yet, even in the face of that. Owlie's charm begot me. I couldn't even begin to tell her no, not if I tried, which I didn't bother doing. She looked so innocent, and not so at once. It was as if she could live forever, and it was the charm, and the hair, and eyes, and skin, and perfect balance of curvature, and her lips, and voice, and indeed, her energy, that gave me the inkling that perhaps, despite her human appearance, that she may have been of an elvish lineage. And knowing what I happened to know about the nature of the elves, and that there were those rarities, born of a human mother and elven father, who looked like humans, but were endowed with the abilities of their elvish parent as well, which made me begin my study of the woman named Owlie. I will say this for now, since I have since gone through the painstaking process of finding her bloodkin, and questioning the one who remained alive, and was certain that I have all the information there is to be had, that Owlie is truly of the rarest of the beings ever to walk Toril. Now, I will tell you this, the study of others is not possible without first studying oneself, for only when one knows themselves through and through can one truly study others without bias. I need not take sides. I need not judge or qualify the behaviors, likes, dislikes, character traits, or demeanor of others, for my own measure is not validated by them. To get to the point I am trying to reach, I must take you back in time, back to a time when I was far younger, perhaps 29 or 30 winters, when I had only just been deemed a magus of some skill, but not yet a full wizard by my peers. You see, my peers, well, they were not very agreeable towards me. It wasn't that I wasn't amiable, nor was it that I had any sort of problems interacting with others. I didn't smell bad, or look bad, or at least, the lady folk I was romantic with in those years said to me, and others, which may have been part of the problem. You see, you must understand, there is a community, globally, of wizards. They are an uptight, closely knit group of folk, not really interested in change over much, or forward-thinking, preferring to rest their haunches on steady, traditional ways, and they were, well, very boring, and for lack of some better description, stuffy and haughty, and judgmental and brash, and those things, well, weren't my cup of tea, you see, for I was young, and far ahead of the curve. I had new ideas that challenged the status quo, and was very, very forward-thinking, which the elders and traditionalist mages did not like one bit. In fact, so against my ideas and suggestions were they, that my own master, Mages Grey and Garfinger, renowned mage of evocation and illusion, sent me away from my training in Waterdeep, far away, to the most remote location he could find, and not lose face by going to backwater, but still get me as far from the conclave of wizards as he could, by sending me to Arm, where I was to become one of the coward wizards, which were the only legitimate arcane spellcasters in the nation of Arm, all others having been outlawed by the Council of Six. Of course, I did not fit in there either, the corruption and backstabbings proving to be too much for one so upright and forward-thinking as myself. Now, there were other wizards in Arm, who were not of the coward wizards, but they were outlaws. The main body of these outlaw mages were called the Emerald Cabal. They were rogue wizards, intent on the destruction of the totalitarian system
of the army and governing bodies.
It was there, surprisingly.
I found that I fit in very well.
It was a great shock to my master and the rest of the conclave that I was reported to have gone rogue and joined the Emerald Cabal, and I was all the more happy about it. There were a few drawbacks to my choice to go rogue, one of them being that I was constantly on the run from the law.
Whether it was the City Watch, the security agents of the coward wizards, or freelance bounty hunters working for the government, paid to track down those who practiced magic in arm.
Since all but those of the coward, wizards were banned from arcane spellcasting there.
Another unfortunate happenstance of being part of a group of rogue wizards was the lack of formal training, at least at first.
For the first few years, I had to rely
on my own advancement through the tiers of wizardry,
which, to be honest, was very difficult.
Yet I seemed to have fared well in the end of it. Then one day, I believe it was the year 1421 DR, it being now 1492, I met my mentor, and one of the greatest wizards never to be well known in all the lands. Michael Roybert, for rogue wizards like he, and now myself, are widely slept upon, or unremarked,
and tend to only gain fame through infamy, which is only desirable to those of a more evil-minded alignment. In my experience, Master Roy,
as he was called by the younger apprentices in our guild of mages, was possibly the most powerful evocationist I have ever known, or known of, in fact.
Now, I have been digressing for some time now,
and the topic of my tale has been fluctuating quite a bit. But bear with me, for there is a method to my madness.
One evening, as I was going over some scrollwork with Master Roy, on the veranda of his chamber in his manse upon the falls of Esmelterin,
there came a hard knock on the chamber door. Upon opening the door, in came a trio of coward wizards, staffs in hand. They were intent on killing Master Roy, foremost, then myself afterwards.
The spell battle to follow was so fertile with evocations
that it went down in the history books as the
most intrepid duel between Magi to ever have been recorded.
I remember it well. In came the trio of wizards, two of whom I knew well from my days in their company, Magus Farnician
and Magus Adept Halimot. The third mage I knew not, but he was most definitely in charge. He brashly strolled into the chamber, held his staff aloft, as it glowed at the tip with an arcane fusion of greenish blue light, which crackled with the strands of magical sinew, which I knew to be threads of the all-encompassing weave of magic, and he declared,
Magus Roybert, I am Clavicus Valeritum, High Wizard of the Cowl, representing the Circle of Six in an authoritative capacity. You will stand down and allow the apprehension and binding magically of yourself and your apprentice, Magi Adept Preyus Verr, to be taken into custody of the Circle of Six for the crimes of illegal use of arcane spellcasting, training of others in the use of the weave, and renegade wizardry, in disallegiance to the Circle of Six and the Nation of Should you defy this order to be taken into custody, it is my duty to inform you that you are to be put to death for the defiance of a royal and lawful order from the Circle of Six, and by their authority I have been given the task of seeing that immediate death of you and your apprentice come to fruition forthwith. What say you, rogue wizard and traitor of the Nation of
Now firstly, let me just impart upon you, my good reader, just how little this decree affected Master Roybert.
He was not even slightly put off, nor was he afraid, and in fact,
he smiled wryly, stood from the cushion he'd been kneeling on, and without his staff of arcane focus,
which he usually had next to him at all times,
and had failed to keep close by this night, and squared his shoulders towards the indignant wizard who threatened us both. I, for my own part, stood as well, and picked up my staff which was laying next to me as I did. I was very scared.
To be honest, having never been in a battle with more than one opponent, and then never with another spellcaster, I did my best to hide my fear,
and inclined my chin, which was clean-shaven, as I have never been one to wear the long chin whiskers of the vast majority, and do, Master Roy, without a single shred of fright or trepidation, and only the confidence that comes with knowing one's abilities, and being sure of them completely, said,
I say this, you coward and weakling, I am giving you the lawful order. On behalf of my own natural law of one, as I exist, as a free and sovereign individual, under the rule of only one master, the weave of magic itself, for you and your too panty-wasted, small-pricked, blind followers to take your fucking foolish selves, and your staffs, and your decrees, and any other thing you have to say. And leave now, or it is you who will be put to death. For, and I say this in full faith, my apprentice here, by himself, could kill all three of you without batting an eye. So know this when you step to us with your order, fool, that you will die a painful death by the arcane fire of our wrath. For the crimes of entering my home without permission, criminal threat of violence and death on innocent parties, who do not bow down to your control of life through fear and misuse of authority. And lastly, the crime of being a fucking brainless coward, without the backbone to live by your own will, following the will of corrupt and greedy maggots, who do not have any authority here. Do I make myself clear?
Never in all my life, before or since, have I heard anyone speak so perfectly when getting a point across to a foe. And oh my, did it ever get the point across?
Cladicus Valoritum, indignant wizard that he is,
Wrinkled his already homely, rather long brow, his eyes narrowing to slits, and said,
I just knew you would say some impetuous shite like that, Roybert. You scallywag. So be it, no more time for talk. Mages, you know what to do. Make it so.
and with that, all hells broke loose. Immediately upon order,
the two Magi with Cladicus Valoritum began to cast spells, which caught me by surprise, as I was but a novice in regards to battle magic.
though I did know what to do in this situation from my training.
I saw that the mage on my right, Mage's Vanition, was casting a circle of protection, likely from evocation magic,
About himself and his comrades so quickly.
before he could finish his first stanza. I used an old trick I'd learned from one of the elders back,
When I was but a fledgling mage,
and cast a cantrip which shot a low-level electrical pulse from my fingertip.
striking the mage with it. It was only a mild jolt,
But it was enough to break his concentration.
causing him to fail in his casting.
With a curse and a grunt,
He glared at me and began to cast anew.
before he had a chance to finish his next spell, however, I released a spell of my own, having had it charged up in my mental reserves. It was a spell I designed myself called Internal Push,
which caused the internal organs of the
target to push away from one another violently by creating a negative electron, reactive energetic force, between separate tissues within a water body.
Very suddenly, Mage's Vanition screamed aloud,
Like a dying horse he sounded, and blood spurted from his eye sockets and nose,
and he bit down so hard that his teeth broke when they smashed together.
and his torso contorted violently, with a sickening sound like that of a goat being slaughtered.
The squish and squash of the organs exploding within his ribcage, and he collapsed, dead as can be.
This frightened the other mage,
On the far side of Cladicus and his spell, that of a magic missile,
missed its intended target, just narrowly flying with a hiss and a hot blaze of magical force past my head, slamming into the wall to my right,
exploding it so that a gaping hole was left there. One could see the beautiful waterfalls outside.
through the new orifice. Simultaneously,
As the magic missile whizzed past in my head, Master Roy had begun his own spell, weaving his hands in the air and reciting intricate arcane stanzas.
as fire began to form about his body, first in small sparks and then
Larger licks of flame began to swirl about him, and at the same time as well,
the mage Cladicus Valoritum had finished a spell, one I had not seen before.
the ground began to shake, mildly at first, but within a short moment,
The earth beneath my feet began to rock violently,
and then, suddenly, out from the shuddering earth came 3 spires of rock.
jutting upwards at random angles. So quickly did this occur that I didn't even see the spires form.
It was as if they were just there, all of a sudden. To my relief,
None of the rocky sword-like spires had found its mark, though one had come dangerously close to impaling Master Roy, and yet
it didn't break his concentration, and at that moment, he cast his spell. With a roar, Master Roy said the final word of arcane power, completing the spell, and from his outstretched fists, both forward in front of him, came a series of molten balls of rock, flinging lava behind them as they went speeding through the air.
2 of these molten projectiles missed their mark, flying at a great rate of speed past the 2 remaining wizards.
Into the wall of Master Rui's home, immediately lighting it afire, and to my horror, I saw that a beautiful tapestry from Kalenshin that I had always admired lit up like a bonfire, burning to ashes. The third ball of lava rock found its mark, right in the face of the Mage's adept Halimot, and he didn't even have time to scream before his head was no longer a part of his body, or at least most of it. The molten rock had burned so hot that it went through flesh, bone, and brain matter at an extreme rate of speed, leaving Halimot with a mess of flesh atop his neck, burning and smoking. His ears on either side, all that was to remain of his previous visage, as they swung at grotesque angles, then fell with the rest of his now dead body slumping to the floor. Now, the Mage Cladicus snarled and began the words of his next spell, speaking them quickly, and just as a ray of lavender energy came shooting from his palm, striking Master Roy in the chest, I unleashed a spell of my own, slamming my staff on the ground with as much force as I could. I spoke the 3 words of power that were the key to casting another spell of my own design. Ground Spear, I called it, and the name spoke for itself, for an adamant spear came sliding up from the ground right underneath Cladicus, impaling him upon it, his own spell dying off as the ray of life-draining force that was just previously stuck to Master Roy's chest vanished, along with Cladicus' life force itself, and he never rose again. The Mage Roybert lived. Of course, he lived. However, he was weakened by the ray of life-stealing force that had been cast upon him by Cladicus, as the spell was one of a permanent nature. Once stolen, the life essence of the target would never return. So, for the rest of his days, Master Roy was unable to cast his most favored spells, and his most brilliant designs were lost to him. However, he did manage to shoulder his legacy to some degree by making a name for himself somewhat, designing spells for wizards to master, and he would end up making quite a fortune teaching other mages how to cast his intricate and powerful spells of all types, but mostly evocations. He always thanked me every time I'd see him from then until he died a number of seasons ago, and would tell me how much he owed me for saving his life, even if he was half the wizard he used to be. And personally, I thought he was far more than he ever gave himself credit for.